Uh, my name is Kinlian. I find that our government is spending too much money on infrastructure. So I invited Meng Seng to discuss this topic with me.
Hi everyone, I'm Goh Meng Seng from People's Power Party. Glad to be in discussion with Kinlian on this topic as well. Well, recently, Kinlian, we have gone through the budget that the government says that they are having a lot of mega projects. They don't have enough money. And we have already seen the high-speed rail from Malaysia side that they want to scrap it and all that. Well, on several occasions that you have already made known your position that our government is actually spending too much money in infrastructure. Can you elaborate on that?
Some time ago, I read a newspaper report that the Thomson Line would cost $18 billion. I was quite shocked because I remembered in the 1980s when we built the North-South line, if my memory was correct, it was around $2 billion. Now, how does $2 billion become $18 billion? Of course, I know that there's inflation, but inflation is not that much. So I did some check, and I saw a newspaper report of a speech given by the transport minister. He said that the North-South line cost, if I remember, around 2.8 billion when it was built, and adjusted for inflation, it's about 4 billion. So 4 billion compared with 18 billion is 4 times. So I'm quite, I asked, how is it possible? Now, of course, we know that before the North-South line, certain parts were underground, certain parts were above ground. Maybe the Thomson line has more underground, but sure, it does cost more, but it cannot cost 4 times more. So I think we are probably paying far too much.
But is there really a way to actually gauge how much should such an infrastructure cost?
Yes, I think this is very important. We must find a way. Now, for a major project, before committing on that project, I think the government or the person who makes a decision should make a study and find out what is the comparable in other cities. For example, if we are building, let's say the high-speed rail. We are not the only country building high-speed rail. You have them in Japan, you have them in China, you have them in European countries. So if we're going to build a high-speed rail, then we need to know how much is the budget. How much do other countries pay? Because we can find out what is the cost per square mile, cost per kilometer. And this is, of course, the work of a consultant. We can appoint a consultant to do this study. And I want to actually suggest we should appoint 2 consultants, because we know sometimes the consultants, they themselves are prejudiced. They might prefer the system from their country. So we should be appointing 2 consultants and say, the first consultant, take a look at these countries, what is the cost to build a high-speed rail. Another consultant can take a look at other countries. Now, of course, we know any project, the cost could depend upon the specification. Do you want very high standard, or do you want not so expensive but adequate? You got different standard. So when the reports come, it can go into a panel who can discuss discuss the reports, and they can then make a decision, which is more important for us. Is it we want to spend to be the most expensive in the world, to be the highest standard, or do we want to be a bit more frugal, to be more careful with our money. So then we will have a decision taken which make a balance between cost and quality. So if we do have such a study, I think our North-South line would not cost $18 billion. Maybe it will cost much less. And our high-speed rail, I don't know. Maybe it will cost quite different from what I hear the Malaysian high-speed rail is costing. So it's quite important to have this process to check and then make a decision, what do we want?
Well, in certain aspect, I think we are the victim of our own success because we are perceived to have a lot of money in terms of in our reserve. And the government of the day actually thinks that we should spend for the best. But for example, the Terminal 5, actually, what is the best? Do we need it in the end? That's one question. And what are the price tags? And up to now, they cannot give us a budget on what they are going to spend. You know, what do you think? What's wrong with it, or do we really need the T5?
Now, if we have adopted the process I described, there would have been a study, and that study would have told us how much T5 would have cost, whether we want it to be very expensive or we want it to be more modest. Furthermore, I would expect that study also to address the question, do we really need T5? And how big should it be? So this is all part of that study. We shouldn't be committing ourselves to a budget that is unknown. So the process of having a budget properly decided based upon reports of comparable, and I would expect that in that study we may also want to consider how big we want T5 to be, whether we really need T5. So this is, I thought, a proper process. Now, somebody tell me this study has been made, then I ask, if this is being made, why is it not being publicized?
Yes.
What is there? Why is so secretive? So we should be publicizing this, and more important, we should know how big is the budget and how does it compare with other cities, other airports, and do we really want to be as grand as that?
Yes, we do not even have a budget and estimate. And even when the tender comes in, we do not even know how much it will cost in the end. I do not know what type of budgeting or consultancy they have engaged in this project. So apparently, I do not think they have done a thorough job in what you have described in making an estimate. Of course, a budget is only an estimate. It will actually depends on the tender price. But at least the tender price will tell us how much it will cost, right?
Well, actually, if we do have a budget, it's a very good benchmark to compare with the actual tender price that comes in. Anyway, if you have done your study properly, your specification would have been properly described so that it doesn't end up with being very expensive. So this process is quite important. Now, I did mention that maybe there was such a study, but it's being kept a secret. And I think it should not be. I think it should be released, then people will understand why you want Terminal 5, how big it is, how much you're going to spend, and how does it compare with other airports.
No, in Hong Kong, when they have a mega projects like this, every budgeting, every funding that is given to these projects will have to go through the LegCo, their parliament, their parliamentary committees to actually decide to question why it's so. What is this price tag? How much is this price tag? What are they getting for this price tag? But apparently, our parliament is defunct in that sense that we do not have that checks and balances that's put in to actually decide for mega projects like this. All are being done in the black box by the cabinet or the ministry themselves. I think we should have something well recorded as a case study, how the process has been through, so that people will understand, instead of guessing that someone is overpricing in certain aspect. Do you agree with such process?
I think it would be a good idea for this to be discussed in Parliament. When it's discussed in Parliament, then there is that responsibility to explain how the decision is being made, what is how much it's going to cost. Then there will be better understanding. So clearly, our Parliament is not doing its job. I know we are paying very high salaries to our MPs, and I'm also very disappointed that in many parliamentary settings, the MPs are not there, but that's their job. We engage them to look after the public money, and therefore they should be spending more time. They should be looking at this matter and even helping to provide some checks that the civil servants or whoever is in charge of the project don't just spend too much money, more than necessary.
And in fact, I think such committees, when set up by the Parliament, could actually call in expert witness to give, for example, if you're going to build a port, a mega port, or another runway, there will be impact on the environment. So academics and NGOs are actually invited to the sitting and provides their findings or their appeals against certain projects or concerns about certain projects on the impact of environment. But this is done in Hong Kong, but definitely not in Singapore. We are just going through a very fussy way of doing things.
Well, recently we have this flood, unexpected flood, and we even have roads cracking, the Lornie Road cracking. So someone commented to me that we are doing too much digging for MRT, for the deep water tunnel, and for all the constructions. So your concern about environment and the impact of all this construction work is already being felt through this flooding and the road crackling and collapsing and so on. So these are very important. Let me then summarize my concern. We are spending a lot of money on infrastructure. I think we're spending far too much. I'm all for infrastructure. It helps to improve the facility in Singapore, the transport, but we should have a way to tell ourselves what is the right amount to spend. If it is 10 billion, please don't spend 20 billion. That money can be used for somewhere else. So we should have a process first to decide, do we need it? And if we do we want 10 billion or 20 billion? They are comparables to take a look at. And this should be discussed within a panel. And that panel, their discussion could have been video recorded and put up so that the public can view and say, oh, these were the considerations that went into that decision. Yes, it may have to go to Parliament for approval, and I hope the MPs will do the discussion. But if there is transparency, the MPs would know, and they would probably find it easier to make a decision, and we will all probably feel that we are spending the right amount. We are not overpaying. So we do want good infrastructure, but we don't want to overpay. We do need a good process to make sure we get the right decision.
Okay, thank you, Kinlian.
Thank you.